In the last video we learned about fleshing out the figure with simple contours and tonal shapes. And if you haven't seen that video, check that one out first, the link is below. This video is about exercises to help us learn the skills that are in that video. We want to lay down simple contours and tonal shapes, but it's hard to ignore all those details and nuances in the figure. So we're going to restrict ourselves in this exercise, force ourselves to see the few lines and the few shapes that define the figure and only use those in our drawing. So first, lay down a stick man with a rib cage and so on and correct it with measurements as needed, as we've learned in previous videos. And this is just our foundation layer, so keep it light. Now you're going to try to put down some contours and tonal shapes, but for the contours you're only allowed to use a minimal number of straight lines. In other words, you should try to capture the pose using as few lines as possible. The drawing's going to end up looking a bit angular and sharp. The aim of the exercise is to improve your ability to see the most important visual information first, before seeing nuance and detail. You could even challenge yourself with a maximum number of lines. For example, I've done a few where I allowed myself a maximum of 10 lines for the torso, 10 for the head, and 10 per limb. We'll simultaneously add tonal shapes as well as contours. You must decide for every part of the figure you see whether it's dark, mid-tone, or light. Just 3 levels of tone, no nuance, no gradation. Everything has to go into one of those 3 boxes. You then divide the figure into large, simple geometric shapes, shapes with straight edges that depend on the level of the tone. If there are small spots of light or dark, you can ignore those for now. We just want big shapes. Try to avoid making the shapes complicated. You can ignore little bumps and spikes in the tone. Cut through the detail and get to the big tonal shapes and simplified contours only. Squinting your eyes can help you see those simple tonal shapes. Then you need to strongly fill in the geometric shapes corresponding to the dark areas, lightly fill the ones that correspond to the midtone. Subscribe to the Love Life Drawing channel, you get weekly videos, more life drawing tips and inspiration. If you like, you can add a 4th and 5th level, the very darkest and very lightest spots. You can only choose a small percentage of the figure to fall into those categories, especially the lightest. The lightest and darkest, they should just be small areas or even just lines or spots on the figure. They don't have to be large, simple shapes like the other areas of tone. They're more kind of like highlights. Again, this is just a quick exercise where the drawings might take 10 to 15 minutes, but you should go at a pace that you're comfortable with. You can also challenge yourself even more by allowing yourself to only use triangles and different types of rectangles for the tonal shapes. Now, to become familiar with this idea of tonal shapes, we would once again like you to pick up a newspaper or a magazine, preferably newspaper since it has that nice paper to draw on. Find a picture of a person lit from one side. In other words, you should see clear areas of shadow on their face. Often photographs of musicians or dramatic performers fit that bill. You won't need full figures. Even just a face will work for this exercise. Now start to draw the simple tonal shapes you see onto your selected photos. The point is to divide the photo into light, dark, and mid-tone just using simplified shapes. There won't be a right answer to this. Draw the shapes that you see. Once you've done this, draw those same shapes in the same pattern off to the side. Try to focus on not consciously drawing a person. You should just focus on copying over the shapes that you drew. You aren't aiming to end up with a good drawing of a person, you're just trying to match the pattern of the tonal shapes. Now once you've got those basic tonal shapes copied over, you might like to insert some details to turn your shape pattern into a face, extra lines needed for the eyes, mouth and nose. And then you can have a look. How is your drawing looking? Is it quite different to the drawings of faces you would normally do? Treat hair as a mass, a 3D shape like other body parts. Resist the idea that hair is lots of strands. The mass of the hair is a 3D volume. Stray strands that fall away from the mass can be added individually, but the focus really is on this 3D shape of the hair. Now, this exercise should also take between 5 and 10 minutes per drawing. It's a quick way to get yourself to start to simplify the light and the dark that you see. These are really useful exercises. Learning to see simplified contours and tones is going to have a big impact on your figure drawings and your portraits. But the skills take time to develop, so you have to keep at these exercises and persevere with them. In the next video, we're going to go over the whole drawing process that we've looked at up until now. We're going to recap it, and we're going to have some tips for final details on the drawing and keeping the drawing dynamic.